Tony Abbott is a backbencher, but 7 people are already running against him to get him out of Parliament. Why? One of them is actually the former co-host of Australian Idol, James Mathison, who has announced his candidacy, is getting plenty of support from the left-wing media, from the SBS, from The Guardian, from Fairfax, and he joins me now. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks for having me, Andrew, and support from you as well. I'm on your show. It's wonderful.
Absolutely. I'm giving you publicity. Let no one say this show isn't even-handed. But, mate, 7 candidates running against him. What's so scary about Tony Abbott? Is
that unusual when you look around the country? What's the nomination process in other electorates? I think you'll find around the country that you'll have a ballot form that has between 5 and 10 nominees in most of the electorate. So I don't think that's highly unusual. I think also
I think more like 4 to 6.
Okay, so 7 is probably one more than average. And maybe that's with me entering the fray. I think the thing is that there's a sentiment in Warringah that he's let people down, that he's promised to do things that he hasn't done over and over again, and there's the sense that he needs to be held accountable for those things.
Yeah, but he has, in one sense, if you think that he got his just desserts. He's no longer Prime Minister. I mean, you know, you're against some of his policies, I read, you know, like same-sex marriage, the boat people policy, a couple like that. Why aren't you running against Malcolm Turnbull? He's in the same party, with the same policies, and is the Prime Minister. Wouldn't it be great to knock him off?
This is my electorate. I was born and raised in Frenchs Forest. I went to school in Brookvale. I worked in Beacon Hill and in Manly, and I've lived in Curl and all throughout that electorate. Why would I go and try and contest against Malcolm Turnbull when my concern is Warringah? That's my electorate, and he is the representative of Warringah.
But you've lived in DY in Mackellar for years. You've lived in DY in Mackellar for years.
Well, if you have a look at where the boundary is, there's parts of DY that's in Mackellar, and there's parts that are also in Warringah. And if you're going to be technical about that, Tony Abbott isn't even in Warringah. He's outside the electoral boundary. So this isn't about, you know, where the points on the map is or why I would go up against Malcolm Turnbull. This is about the fact that year after year after year, even at his most recent launch of his campaign, he promised that he would improve Brookvale Oval, he would improve transport, he would improve the environmental processes on the northern beaches. And if you look back 3 years, he said the same thing. If you look back 6 years, he said the same thing. I've got articles from 2001 where he said exactly the same thing. So if you say you're going to do something over and over again and you don't follow through with it, either you're incompetent or you're disingenuous. So the electorate, I feel, deserves better.
But basically, in your media appearances, you haven't honed so much on local issues. You've been talking about the big ones, borders, climate change, etc., etc. But and like I say, the same policies are espoused now by Malcolm Turnbull. There's not the desire to get him out of his seat. But can I go through, if you're going for politics, can I go through some of your policies? For instance, number 1 for me is debt. What would you do to bring it down?
I think we're talking all the time, and you know, Scott Morrison talks all the time that we have a spending problem, not a revenue problem. So I think there needs to be a bit of accountability on that front. What are we doing? We're trying to tax businesses across the board, and we're giving big tax cuts to big business. 70% of all people employed are employed by small and medium business. That needs to be our focus. These massive
They're getting
corporations,
a tax cut too.
They are, of course, and that should be the focus, not the free ride that big business
is. It is the focus. The big business doesn't get it until 8, 9, 10 years from now.
Yeah, but they are still getting it, and that's what I'm talking about.
But I'm talking about debt. I'm talking about debt. What would you do to bring down our debt?
I think in many ways we've got a problem with the amount of people on welfare and the amount of welfare that we're doing and the amount of red tape that's involved in getting people off welfare and into the system so they're able to pay tax. The amount of bureaucracy that's involved in that is breathtaking, and we need to actually look at the way we're doing that to ensure that it's streamlined and we're saving money.
Get more people off welfare. Well, you get a bit of cross-party support there. How would you get more people into jobs?
You need to have incentives for young people, and a lot of the time, young people, and the young people I speak to, have this sense of hopelessness. And this is sort of why I'm running as well. There is this idea that young people are not being represented by the major parties. If you watched the debate the other night, young people are just...
I know hope. Look, I want to give hope too, James. That's, you know, hope.
Well, you want to give hope.
What's the policy?
The idea that young people have an opportunity... Yeah, I'm getting to the policy, Andrew. If you want to have people having hope, young people having hope, you need to make sure that they have skills, they have training, they have accessibility to develop themselves. We've seen government after government, Labor and Liberal, strip funding from TAFE over and over again. If you're going to do that, you're going to get a system where the only people that can train up young people for apprenticeships, for traineeships, are these private colleges which are charging money and exploiting young people. Money has to go into the TAFE system to have good teachers and to have people who are able to go through the system, have hope, get trained up.
More TAFE. That's what Labor's saying too. But in fact, there's been a lot of money put in education, heaps of money.
But our results haven't changed, though. Our results haven't changed, so we're not spending the money correctly.
No, they've gone down. That's right.
So,
mate, speak to me. Speak to me. This is absolutely right. The Islamic State, what would you do to keep Australians safer abroad and at home?
We have been involved in the Middle East over and over again. And some of the things that we are doing, we have to ask ourselves, does that make us safer here? Does that make us safer here? That balance is really tricky, and we have to work out on every intervention, every time we get involved over there, is that our responsibility over there? And also, does that make us more safe or less safe as a nation?
So don't attack the Islamic State in Syria.
That's not what I said. We have to actually think about.
Well, I don't know. That's the only
repercussions.
intervention we've got, really. Well,
do you think
boat people policy before Tony Abbott? Can I just before, because we're running out of time, boat people policy before Tony Abbott, hundreds of boat people were drowning, tens of thousands of illegal immigrants were arriving, taking the place of real refugees, and thousands of children were in detention.
Totally get it.
Tony Abbott stopped the boats, stopped the illegal immigrants, took in genuine Syrian refugees, and now there's no child in detention. What would you have done differently to Tony Abbott?
That's not what the issue is anymore. It seems that what he's done, the turnbacks...
Oh, I think, I'm just saying, would you give him a little credit for that?
If your metrics are people dying at sea, are people coming into this country through maritime means, then no, then the metrics he's put in have worked. The trouble is you have people in detention who have experienced conditions who are horrific. We haven't treated them with dignity, with humanity, with respect. The United Nations, the Australian Human Rights Commission report, the Moss Review, Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International have all said that by keeping them in indefinite detention, in the conditions that we have them in, we're doing long-term damage to them. So if you think
I don't actually believe Gillian Triggs's report, but listen, I'll ask you about that. What would you do then?
Have you read the Triggs report?
Yes,
have you read it?
Yes, I have.
This is psychologists,
yes, I have.
This is counsellors, this is psychiatrists who have spoken with kids and families. No. This is psychologists, this is counsellors, this is family workers who have spoken to the children and the families involved. So if you don't believe that report, do you believe the Human Rights Watch report, the Moss Review that was commissioned by the coalition themselves? The point is, if his efforts to stop people coming to this country have worked, fine. But we have an obligation to make sure...
It's not if it has worked, it has worked.
Then we also have an obligation to take care of the people who are under our care in detention. No ifs, no buts. No buts.
So how? So you'd let them in or what? Because they don't want to go home.
You make sure... Have you seen... The facilities on Manus Island were inhumane and they were cruel.
Yeah.
And on Nauru, we had conditions that were awful. You know, the only journalist that went there was Chris Kenny.
I'm trying to find out what you would do. They don't want to go home.
Well, you would make conditions there at least bearable. You would make them... give them ability to upskill, language skills. You would give them the opportunity to live in housing, which could be used perhaps in the future as low-cost housing for the people of Nauru. And you need to give them an opportunity to a pathway to a better life.
Yeah, but I don't know what that is. And they want to come here and we don't want to let them in and they don't want to go home. So I'm not quite sure how that's resolved. This is the great issue that I think it's easy to strike a pose, but I'm not sure that actually fixes the problem.
But James, are you saying that the conditions that they have been in have been humane?
Oh, well, look, I think they have. Yes, I do.
Okay.
I do. But they want to come here and they don't want to go home. And this is the dilemma. And I don't know that any government is going to be able to fix that anytime soon. But, James, we'll have you back on if you don't mind and talk these things through at a longer format. Thank you very much for your time.
That's lovely. We'll have a latte or something together.